Welcome to Dreams and Ladders, the podcast for women in male-dominated fields who want to lead with confidence, make an impact, and thrive in meaningful, challenging work. If you're ready to rise without burning out, excel as the leader you know you're meant to be, and stop feeling like you have to do it all alone, you're in the right place. It's your time to lead, thrive, and rise. Hi, I'm Lori Cranenberg, your host of the Dreams and Ladders podcast. And today we're going to be talking about why being smart isn't enough to get you promoted. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You got good grades in school. You went to the right school. You work hard and you love learning. So that should be enough to get you ahead in your career, right? Not always. I'm also willing to bet that maybe you don't love networking or social gatherings or cold calling somebody that you don't know, even if it's part of your job functions. And there may be many other things that you don't enjoy doing and probably don't put as much effort on. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It might sound obvious, but what got you to the position you're in isn't what's going to get you to the next position. And there's some things I'm going to talk about that I wish I had known earlier on in my career because it would have helped me out a lot sooner. But first, let me tell you a little story. So I used to work two jobs pretty much at the same time. I was full-time in policing, and I also worked with the Canadian Forces Reserves. And that meant that I was super busy trying to manage two careers. Okay, yeah, a little bit of an overachiever sometimes. But what I noticed was that my policing career wasn't doing as well as my military career. And I started wondering, what's the difference between the two? I'm still the same person with the same abilities showing up in both functions, but why is it that in one I am seen as doing better and my evaluations are higher and the other one not so much? And so I started looking at things a little bit and trying to figure out what's going on here. And one of the things I noticed was that in policing, I was really good at my core job functions. And that's what I focused on, my core functions. I showed up, I gave it my all every day, I did my job to the best of my abilities, and then at the end of my shift, I went home. In the military, I knew that we were rated not only on our performance, but also on our potential to perform at the next rank. And our performance evaluation system outlined different things that we needed to consider. We were evaluated on different competencies for performance and for potential. And so in the military, it was a regular way of life to know that you needed to do secondary duties, that you needed to show initiative, that you needed to do self-development and show that you were furthering your education as part of your professional development on the job. I was doing those things in my military role, but I wasn't doing them in my policing role. And that's when I had this big light bulb aha moment. It's like, wait a minute. Actually, policing was my primary career. That was my primary job. And yet I was giving all of the secondary effort to a secondary job. That was a big aha moment for me. And that's when things started to change. I started looking at my policing career the way I had looked at my military career. Now, in policing, we weren't evaluated the same way in a formal sense, but certainly the underlying current in the background was still looking at your performance and your potential. And that is a huge distinction on what sets you apart and gets you promoted, or you find yourself left behind. So let's dive into this a little bit more, this concept of high performance and high potential. And I'm willing to bet if you're listening, you've probably been described as a high performer. You're probably one of those people who takes great pride in your work. You work really hard. You want to make sure that anything that you work on is to a high standard. You are a high performer in your job. But are you expending the effort in the right areas? Because continually developing yourself as a high performer means that you stay at the level that you're at. And while you might get the compliments and be recognized for doing a great job, that doesn't help you move up, if that's what you want to do. Think about it this way. I go to Starbucks quite often. Yeah, it's kind of like my little guilty pleasure. I like the vanilla lattes, but they make all sorts of different things there. Now, if you think about the coffee barista that works at Starbucks, and there's ones that make fantastic coffees. They do the foam just right. Sometimes they put the fancy little designs in things. You really appreciate that great cup of coffee. And if you get to know your neighborhood coffee shop, you probably know the barista by name. You can appreciate that whenever you go in there, you're going to get exactly what you want. They're going to put the little extras in just to make that coffee feel special. Awesome. But is the barista qualified to be the cafe owner? Are they qualified with all the skills that would come in running the business? And would the business actually continue to perform if the barista took over the business and didn't have those skills? If you think about your own career, where are you focusing your effort? Are you focusing on the skills that make you a high performer, or are you focusing on the skills that make you a high potential? Let's break this down a little bit of what these might look like and what these different types of skills are. Often in high performance, we get very, very competent at our technical skills. And depending on what your profession is, that could be different. Engineers, it may be a very engineering specific skill set. Accountants, it's your accounting skills. Police officers, it's your ability to investigate. It's job specific, but we'll call them technical skills. So the core skills within your profession that help you do very well at the level that you're at. Now, there's a whole other sets of skill buckets that we might be not developing as much because we're comfortable being a high performer and doing really well in those technical skill sets. Some of the other skills areas that we want to start looking at as leadership, emotional intelligence, communication, networking, resilience, different things that are going to help you be a better leader, demonstrate your potential to perform at the next level. If I look at leadership skills, these are ones that often you get promoted to your first position based on your technical competence. So yes, if you're very skilled in your technical skill set and you're a high performer, you will likely make that first level promotion, maybe even the second, based on competence and technical knowledge. But when you get to those positions, now there's other skills that start coming into play. Skills like organizational awareness, problem solving, decision making, initiative, team building. These are all things that sit outside of the performance of your technical skills. And these are also the things that will start differentiating whether or not you have the potential to perform at that next level. I'll never forget early in my military career, I had noticed there was an issue with something, and I had brought the problem to my immediate supervisor. And I thought I did a great job outlining what the problem was and what I had noticed. And I gave a very good description of the problem. And then my boss looked at me and said, Lori, you're an officer. You're not paid to identify the problems. You're paid to identify the solutions. Well, that moment stuck with me for a very long time. And what he told me was, if you're going to bring a problem to my attention, I want you to come with at least 2 solutions. And so that is something that I have tried to do throughout my career, not even knowing that that was really a differentiating factor between high performance and high potential. High performer would probably just deal with the given set of circumstances, not identify any of the problems, and certainly not identify the solutions. So you start to see the distinctions between being really good at what you're doing or demonstrating your ability to take on more responsibility. And then if you start looking at leadership skills on a bigger level and look at things like strategic thinking, you could be a good leader of a smaller team inside an organization that is led by more senior people with bigger teams above you and bigger teams above them. But if you want to be a person who can advance and move up the ranks, you have to be able to look strategically as well, not just the performance of yourself and your team, but also strategically, how do you fit into the organization? That ties back to organizational awareness. And also, what is the company trying to achieve? You have to start thinking bigger picture. And then the higher up you go, The strategic thinking also expands out into the community, the globe. Where does this company fit into that greater environment? What decisions need to be made to keep the company a viable concern? That's the type of shift in thinking that needs to change as you move your way up. It's the kind of skills you have to work on developing. Change management. Often at lower levels, the changes are dictated to you. But as you go higher, if you want to make a change, you need to start thinking about, is this the right change to make? Are we making the change for the right reason? How do we get buy-in for the change? How do we communicate the change? There's so many different things that have to happen. It's a different skill set. It's a different way of thinking. If you identify a problem, as my boss had told me back then, and then identified the solution, and then brought that forward, that's the beginning of a change management process. There are also skills like mentoring and coaching. It's not enough to just be great for yourself for your own sake. If you want to get promoted, if you want to advance, you also need to be able to develop and mentor and coach others. Someone is going to have to take your position eventually. Wouldn't it be great if you were working on developing the person who will step into that role, and that you can show that you can help develop people, create the continuity within the business, not leave gaps? When you go on vacation, it's a great time to get a person to step into your role and see how they perform, and then have great conversations with them about what went well and what would they do differently in the future. But that mentoring and coaching type of relationships, these are things that are higher potential characteristics, not the high performance characteristics. We could also look at emotional intelligence. I recently did a certification for the EQI 2.0, and it was really interesting doing the certification and just seeing what the results were, seeing what my classmates, what their results were, and talking through things and how they all interrelate. One of the great things about emotional intelligence, if you ever have an assessment done, is that this is just kind of where you're at right now, but there are areas that you can develop. But if you're not aware of your default mechanisms, your default ways of being and interacting with others, and how you use emotions for decision making, it can leave some blind spots to how others are perceiving you. I know for myself, it was very interesting for me on my assessment that my self-regard was below my achievement. So I achieve at a higher level than what I believed in myself. And I remember being debriefed on that, and they asked me, can you tell me a bit more about this? And I was thinking, I'm like, well, I'm not quite sure. I don't think of myself as having a confidence problem, but maybe I do. I'm not quite sure. And then I was asked, well, is it possible that you set very high standards for yourself? Yes, that is quite possible. I set very high standards for myself. Okay, so when I answered questions about self-regard, I was thinking about some really, really high standards when I answered those. And it didn't match what my actual levels of achievement were. My self-actualization was much higher than my self-regard. That was eye-opening for me, but it was something that if I hadn't been aware of, I would just continue on autopilot going the way I was. And now I actually pause. And when I think about, am I lacking confidence in an area? What standards am I holding myself to? What is the acceptable standard here where I can feel confident achieving that? And then what is that that high standard I keep setting for myself? And is it acceptable to fall within a bandwidth in between the minimum and the high standard that I had been operating from? But it's just things to be aware of. Someone I was coaching was surprised that their decision-making score was low. Well, with the emotional intelligence assessment, we look at how you use emotions to make decisions. Do you consider people and the emotions into your decision-making process, or are you strictly focused on processes and performance? Interesting question. But these are the kinds of things that are like differentiators. A great leader can take all of that into consideration and consider their people and bring in changes or make decisions and still have buy-in from their team. Whereas someone who completely disregards that, maybe their team's not really on board, and maybe now the team has a performance issue. Then there's also communication. How you interact with others, how you communicate can have a huge impact on your ability to progress in your career. And communication is all encompassing. I'm not talking just about your spoken communication. There is your written communications, your emails, your documents that you produce. Can people read them? Does it have too much detail, not enough detail? There's a lot of nuances there in communication. Meetings, are you able to speak up in a meeting? Or do you find yourself sitting there waiting for everyone else to speak and then realizing that someone else shares what you had as a great idea? And now you're kicking yourself that you weren't the one that spoke up in the meeting to bring that idea forward because now someone else gets credit for that idea. Your presentations, are you able to present information in a way that people can understand? Are you able to communicate the direction that you would like to go and why? Do you have the ability to persuade and influence other people in your communications? These skills become more and more important the more senior you get. And in your daily interaction, are you someone that takes the time to communicate with people around you? I had a boss once who always had his nose stuck in, okay, this kind of dates it, but stuck in his BlackBerry, like always looking at his BlackBerry, never looking at the people in the room, no matter what the meeting was. There was no communication there, no in-person communication. So he would be present, but he wasn't present. And these kinds of things get noticed by the people that work for you or that interact with you, that you're just checked out. You're not actually present here physically in the moment. You're off doing something else, and whatever is in front of you is not important to you. And that's the message that you send. He may not have been aware that he was doing that, but his communication style was to communicate pretty much strictly in writing, and all in-person communications didn't really happen because he was always looking at his BlackBerry. I did another assessment tool certification earlier this year called the Strength Development Inventory. And that one is really cool because it has some elements of your strengths and how you use them, but it also has a whole communication piece on what motivates you in communications and what's your conflict style and what do you do when things go wrong. Eye-opening. I highly recommend, if you have never done the EQI or if you are interested in learning more about your communication style and your strengths, the EQI 2.0 and the Core Strength Development Inventory are two fantastic assessments that can really help open up some doors on different areas that you can work on to improve your potential to perform at the next level. And then the last area I'd like to look at is, it's not necessarily a skill in the sense that this is something that you're going to see on a performance evaluation or something that you probably wouldn't be asked in an interview, but maybe things are changing. And that is your resilience. We've talked about being smart's not good enough. Yes, you need technical skills, and your intelligence will get you through those technical skills. You also need the leadership skills. You need the emotional intelligence. You need to be able to communicate, but you also need to look after yourself. I mean, we've all heard the line on airplanes, put your own mask first and then assist someone else. Well, when was the last time you had a look at the state of your actual life, your career life harmony? Are things in balance? Are you burnt out? Do you have time for family and friends? When I first got into the coaching business, I started off with a life coaching certification. The company was named ULA, and their premise was the 7 F's of life and keeping the 7 F's in balance. Now, those 7 F's were fitness, finances, field, which is your career, family, friends, faith, which is not religion. Faith is just your belief in a higher power and in contributing to the greater good, and fun. So 7 F's. And spent a lot of time learning about how to keep those 7 F's in balance. And when I first started doing the certification, ooh, it was quite abysmal where some of those aspects fell for me, because I was good at looking after my finances. I was good at looking after my career, but I had 5 F's that were completely out of balance, had been neglected for a long period of time. And no surprise, I was feeling completely burnt out. And like my life was just, sleep, get up, drive, go to work, drive, come home, eat, go to bed. There wasn't a whole lot of enjoyment in life during that phase. And so looking at that career life balance, career life harmony, I don't like the word balance and career life balance because it implies that they should be equal, and they're not. I like the word harmony because it implies that your career and the choices you make there fit your lifestyle while keeping the other aspects of your life present. Some other things that you can look at for resilience is, what are your routines in the morning? What do you do when you first get up? Are you hitting snooze 15 times and racing out the door last minute to sit in traffic? eating, I don't know, a pizza pocket because you didn't make anything else for breakfast, eating takeout all day, rushing home at the end of the night, nothing's prepped, nothing's prepared, and you're just running on empty? Or do you take the time to set positive intentions in the morning? Do you have gratitude in your life? When you finish work, do you have a way to disconnect from work? And I can appreciate that there are times when you may have to do some work in the evenings or on weekends. I don't advocate that being a lifestyle all the time, but I recognize that with global economy, there are times when maybe your meeting is later in the evening. But do you have separation? Do you have a separation from when one set of tasks finishes and have time with your family, or time for a meal, or time with friends, or time to go do something fun? Do you have routines for that? Do you have a way to disconnect when there is no requirement for you to be connected? Do you have a routine for your evening? Do you prioritize sleep? Is sleep challenging for you? Have you looked for options to make sure you get better sleep? Have you ever made a bad decision at work when you were sleep deprived? Hmm. Or struggled to control your emotions when you're sleep deprived? Although these things are not obvious skill sets, they're not ones that you are going to see on a resume or you're going to see on a performance evaluation. In the background, the resilience piece is what contributes to you being a high performer and a high potential. By keeping life fun, by keeping life enjoyable, and by making sure you're getting sleep, you're rejuvenating. This is how you avoid burnout. I hope that today I've given you just a few things to think about in shifting how you look at your career and understanding that it's great if you're smart, but it's not going to be enough to achieve the goals that you truly want to achieve. So my key takeaways here for you is questions to ask yourself. Are you a high performer or a high potential? And do you need to change anything? Are you developing a well-rounded bucket of skill sets? Not just your technical skills, but are you also developing your leadership, your emotional intelligence, your communication? Are you developing practices that build resilience? In closing, I hope that got you thinking about a few things. I hope that you can take one of these things away and look for ways to implement it this week. If you're interested in the leadership development assessments I've mentioned, the EQI or the Strength Development Inventory, please check out the links in the show notes, or you can go to my website at www.dreamsandladders.com. Until next time, take care of yourself, be you, and do great things.